Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror, movies, and awesomeness. This week, we have a look at the 1997 film, The Night Flier. This is episode 371. Guys, we are within 30 episodes of number 400, of review 400 on this show.
Wow.
Not counting the interviews, not counting special lean back episodes or anything. Just the mainline continuity episodes that are numbered. We're about to hit 400 of them, which is crazy. That's I don't know if the listener is still listening and has some recommendation for what we should do for episode 400. We're all ears. We're interested in hearing what we could possibly discuss or whatever. I will not do anything that will either break me financially or involves like trying to conduct the show while like falling out of an airplane. But I'm interested in suggestions. So okay.
What about flying with a vampire into?
Oh,
I was
man.
thinking we could just do the show from the Dracula's castle.
Oh wow!
In 30
Somehow.
Do you really believe in 30 weeks we're going to be able to get enough
We can
gumption
always
together
dream.
to go to
I
Romania?
mean,
We can always dream.
if the stars aligned,
Sure.
we have 30 plus weeks depending on how our schedule
We could
goes.
do,
so-
yeah, we could start a GoFundMe to have
Right. That's true.
people to fund us to go
To
there.
send
and do
us
the-
to Sigasora and yeah. Okay.
Well,
so
that is if some count doesn't hire you to come be do immigration law at his castle.
when the,
I heard the quotes around that term when you said that.
Yeah. Please come to my castle, Mrs. Guzman, and leave England. I mean, the United States, and you'll be short. Just I just need you here.
I gotta say that's actually a great man. That's a wonderful riff on Dracula. Somebody says, "Tony, give me a riff on Dracula," and you go, "It's easy. Immigration attorney writes itself.
Yeah.
Bada bing."
Oh, I was thinking. I mean, it's solicitor either way, right? But like,
Yes.
Yep.
Sure. But yeah, you you gender swap so that Jonathan Harker is now Julia Harker, and she's an immigration attorney.
there you go.
Yeah. So
We've
it's a
already.
great
This doesn't bode well though, because we've already gone far afield of the Night Flier. I
Yes.
guess we're still in the vampire territory. So.
Yeah. Okay. Bear in mind, listener, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it. So warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, publisher at Castle Bridge Media, home of the Castle of Horror anthology. With me from Austin is Tony Salvaggio. You just heard him, lead singer and bassist of the band Digits of Mars, and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. Also in Austin, Mr. Drew Edwards is the writer-creator of the long-running underground comic Halloween Man, currently published by Comixology. He is a Best Writer Ringo nominee, Austin Chronicle Best of Austin Award winner, and a member of the Pen America Fellowship. Say hello, Drew.
Hello.
Hello. And finally, also in Denver, color commentary from the future attorney of Dracula, Julia Guzman of Guzman Immigration of Denver.
I don't know what to say to that.
Wouldn't that be a great title? Attorney of Dracula is a great title.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. I mean, if only we knew some writers that could.
I know, right?
Something like that.
Okay.
If only anybody I knew had
right
a vehicle,
had a publishing
write
company.
a story, or a comic book, or just wrote books, whatever.
Yes.
No. Rock opera.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. If only somebody I knew.
Can you,
Oh, well.
Tony? Do you think that you could write if I said I want you to give me a bunch of songs that are kind of like Jim Steinman? Can you just rip off Jim Steinman?
I mean, I'm not.
Or could rain.
I'm probably not that person initially, but I bet between Rain and I, more likely, yeah.
That's
yeah.
I
write more rock stuff, and so that. But I think between Rain and I, Rain's the one who writes the musical. So between the two of us,
yeah,
I think probably, yeah. Although I kind of almost want to see this. I always.
That's the challenge for the
400th.
For the 400th episode is for you guys to have a writing competition, and each of you write something
Oh, yeah.
Dracula themed.
Why did the 400th episode just now get a lot harder?
Yeah, exactly.
That's no fun. That's no
I-
fun.
That's no.
I'm-
Wait a minute, work?
I'm thinking more like comedy, like Harvey Birdman, where
Yes.
it's the cartoon Dracula, and then you're dealing with I'm Dracula's attorney. He's asking me to
It's a wonderful
do this
idea.
thing again, and I can't. What you want? What? Oh,
But one song that sounded kind of like Original Sin or
Sure.
like Bat Out of Hell would be
sure,
so cool.
Sure.
Just to a fake. I mean, what would that even sound like? A Jim Steinman parody? What would that sound like? I don't know, but I know it would be funny.
It'd be good.
Okay, The Night Flier. That's what we're talking about. The Night Flier, also known as Stephen King's The Night Flier, is a 1997 American horror film based on the short story of the same title by Stephen King. It was directed by Mark Pavia and stars Miguel Ferrer, the amazing, very versatile Miguel Ferrer, and Julie Entwisle. And I believe that Julie Entwisle actually is or was married to Mark Pavia. So, so there's a full circle here. All right. This is a movie that I don't think I had seen all the way through. I know that it's a favorite of Drew. And here's the way we're going to do the opening thoughts. Julia, Drew, Tony, and then I'll just take us into the topics unless there's anything for me to throw out. Julia, we haven't had an opening thought from you in a few episodes. So what did you
I'm laughing
think?
because every time you start with me, you always say that.
It's true,
It's
though.
been a while since we started.
Yeah.
So at first I started watching this film and I was like, oh God, because I felt many times over this movie, as much as I adore Miguel Ferrer, and by the way, the idea that his mom is Rosemary Clooney and that he like grew up in a house with her and that his cousin was George Clooney, just to me is so funny. But anyway, I like him a lot, but I felt many times in this movie that he was overperforming, like that he was just kind of too angry, too dramatic, too whatever. But there were some times when I really enjoyed his performance a lot. The film gets better and better, and then at the end it's just full on like thriller music video or something like that. It's just like a music video. It is very different at the end than it is at the beginning. I'm just gonna say that. But I think I enjoyed a lot of parts of it. There were definitely some things where I was just either rolled my eyes or just kind of was like, okay, can we move past this part? But it's interesting. There's some interesting things, some interesting themes. I like the idea of this tabloid journalist just kind of chasing around this vampire that can't fly himself. He flies a plane, which is just funny. And the journalist also has a plane. I don't know. There's some interesting themes, and I'm looking forward to talking about it.
Thank you very much. All right, Drew. Now, this was a film that you wanted to talk about, and so I wanted us. There have been many movies that I've forced everybody to watch. Embrace of the Vampire, probably the most famous of them. Also a vampire film of the 90s. Infamous, sure. But this is not like that. This is a movie that you actually had fondness for and had actually seen from beginning to end.
Yes.
So tell us what your thoughts are coming back to it again.
I really like the short story this is based off of.
Is it very different? We can save that if you want.
It skews pretty closely. The ending is different. They add characters because they had to pad out the running time, but it hews fairly closely for a movie that's based off of a short story.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a fun movie. It's definitely very 90s, but I mean that in a good way. It's because was a smaller movie, and I mean that it was direct to video film. It's a lower budget movie. I think that this plays to the strengths of that because it's very much a character study guy, this tabloid reporter who is an unsavory character and an unsavory character through and through. And I think because this is a lower budget movie, it is allowed to just follow through on that. Whereas, like, I think something that was bigger, first of all, they would have to raise, a bigger budget movie would probably try to raise the stakes so they were less personal. And I think, they probably would have tried to tack on traits onto this guy, and I think that it would have been a mistake to soften it, because I think that this works very effectively as it is, with a simple plot, only a few characters, and as a vampire story also. It's interesting to see a film from this era that is skewing differently from what was popular with vampires at the time, because that was definitely sort of at the height of Anne Rice, romanticized vampires, is like, I think in pop culture, the 90s definitely way into that. This is not like that really at all. And so the fact that you have that more gruesome version of a vampire running around is also interesting. This is just a fun little flick. I'm sort of surprised that Shout Factory hasn't done a Blu-ray release of this. I would love for that, because
I agree. Yeah.
The only way we could have ended up watching this is that we had to find a copy of it on YouTube, unfortunately, because this is sort of a forgotten king.
I feel certain that it's
But
between
it's one
releases,
that I think is
because it's
good.
been released not long ago, and in my experience, when stuff disappears off of streaming, it's because it's going to come back soon. So I
This
can
deserves
almost
to be
guarantee
seen
you it's
by
going to
more
pop up pretty soon somewhere.
I think this is a movie that deserves to be seen by more people, because I think it's an excellent example of what low budget horror does really well.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much, Tony. What about you? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I like the movie. I've seen it a few times actually. I think I think it's interesting. I mean, this is coming from somebody, Weekly World News, this is kind of loosely based off of. I mean, there were several, but Weekly World News was the big one. Ceased print publication, I think 2007. I was reading, but this, my friends and I actually wallpapered our wall with Weekly World News.
Did you really?
When I was in college, yeah. Like, we had this upstairs, townhouse that they converted into 3 stories worth of basically apartments, and then there was a stairway, and up the stairway we had Weekly World News. By the way, Abe Lincoln was revived at some point with a drug. I love this is one of my favorites. A drug called Revivatol.
in the Weekly World News.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And,
I just remember the bad
his
boy
words,
being
his
around.
first and last words, I guess, when he woke up was "Gentlemen, where am I?"
Oh my goodness.
But yeah, that's the kind of amazing, and if you believe there's been several pop culture riffs on what part of the Weekly World News is true, and does it harbor actual truth amongst the thing that the people who know how to decode it can really and this kind of plays that kind of stuff kind of plays into this, where you have if it bleeds it leads kind of mentality that are protagonists of the story, but he's a horrible person, ambulance chaser kind of guy. It's just I want the most sensational thing I can get, and in a world where there was Batboy and such like that, this guy's even more unsavory stuff is his part and parcel. And I think that angle where we don't really have, it's all on the internet now. Like, you can go down any rabbit hole with any Wikipedia or cryptid site or whatever. You don't need the Weekly World News perhaps to scratch that itch in the way that you might up until probably late 90s, when once internet became more ubiquitous, it's starts to all get up there. But if you wanted your kind of weekly dose of weirdness, these were the publications that you could subscribe to. And having somebody who's following that, and then the reality of the vampire angle. And Drew was saying, I agree, it was lower budget, but really it does put it all up on the screen. The practical effects and all the gore, and when there's a car wreck and everything's very striking as far as makeup effects go.
Oh yeah, my goodness.
And the overall production, you can tell it was on a budget. The actual finished product, all of it's up there.
Yeah.
And interesting. And I think it does, it's been a while since I've read the short story, and I thought I had it here because I was going to check it out, but I don't have Nightmares and Dreamscapes, unfortunately, on my shelf. I think I have couple of the other short story collections. But it does hew pretty closely, although, by the end, it's a little bit bleaker, I think, than I remembered, which is interesting. But yeah, great cast, and it has, and I don't mean this as a knock, it has an almost TV drama feel to the way that
hold that thought, because that we're gonna get into that.
Yeah, and I thought that was interesting. I didn't remember that, and like I said, again, that is not a knock at all. But it's interesting to see a film. I think it was probably originally slated. You want to try to get something theatrical. Ended up being straight to, was it HBO? If I'm not mistaken,
yeah.
By the end of it,
and that was because they needed to meet. If we believe the research on the internet, they had a deal to release the film, and they had to meet a certain deadline, and their Paramount distribution would have put them too late to meet those requirements. So instead, they released on HBO, and as an HBO original, which happens every day. So yeah.
And I mean, we've talked about like the Hitchhiker and stuff like that, so that's not a bad place to be.
No.
So, but yeah, I liked it, and I'm looking forward to talking about it.
Cool.
More.
Let's start there, actually, at the 90s style, because the place where we would have seen this would be HBO, and then on probably VHS when it came out in 1997. And I knew Tony then. We were living in Austin. And
oh, yeah.
The funny thing is, there's a look of this period, that mid 90s, maybe a little earlier, but where, and you're right, I associate it with stuff like all the Zalman King productions, the Red Shoe Diaries, stuff like the hit Zalman King didn't make The Hitchhiker, but stuff like that. And the funny thing is, I don't even think of it, I suppose it's work on a budget, but that doesn't even matter, because it's work that has a look. And there's in the offices where we open up and we meet Miguel Ferrer and this young lady that he insists on calling Jimmy, who is going to be a reporter. We open up in the offices of this newspaper, and the offices have these long horizontal glass room dividers and wall windows and stuff that I'm telling you, I've never seen in real life, but I've seen in many of these dramas. There's a smoky look, there's a blue look to it all.
Well, I think it's the brightness of things that really strikes me as having that flavor. There's a little bit to the acting style, but I point out these things because, again, none of this is a knock. It's just interesting to see kind of where phases are.
Yes.
Right? Because when you're in that, we weren't saying like, oh, this is definitely 90s style right now, right?
No, I think it's cool.
You watch it and it's like fits. And then in retrospect, you go, wow, that looks like X, Y, and Z. And I never really thought about it in that way. You can kind of, abstract yourself.
Well, I'm going to give you an example. I was watching something from the 70s, and my mom was texted me, because we often watch stuff and text one another. And she goes, I forgot that people had so many plants in their house in the 70s. And that's the thing about the 70s. And here in the 90s, it's like I forgot about like the way everything from Julia kept commenting on the makeup. You're right about the acting style. This movie has a look that makes you think that it's going to be a lot like more, I don't even know how to say it, like sexy 90s than it is. I mean, it does. You mentioned silk stockings. Sure, it looks like silk stockings. It looks like Red Shoe Diaries, and it's none of those things.
I want to say to your thing about the makeup. So yeah, the girl,
Juliet
the main, Catherine, the character's Catherine or Jimmy, like you said. I was looking at her and I just kept getting a 90210 vibe, like going, what is it that makes her makeup so 90s? And I actually interrogated my children because they're savvy about the YouTube makeup videos and all that crap. And I was like, what is it exactly that makes this 90s? Because it's not just the dark lipstick, because people wear dark lipstick. It's apparently the eyeliner pencil going all the way around the eye, and the eyeshadow going all the way around the eye, and then the fact that it's like there's hardly any contouring, so it's just like
because think of Jenny Garth's face,
white.
Jenny Garth's face or Shannon Doherty's face on 90210.
Yeah,
there's
her
no
face is
contouring
super white. She's like a lot of foundation, but no real contour, and then also the dark lipstick. Anyway, it's just interesting to look at, and then the clothing, the little pearl necklace and everything. But yeah, just these little things that just kind of make you go, that's 90s.
I like how she also kind of gets more gothier as it goes
That's
along.
true. Yes.
Yeah.
Like
As she gets more
becomes-
hard, basically, she's getting
yeah.
hardened to the road.
I told Jason I would have reacted exactly the same way she did to Miguel Ferrer. Like this whole idea of like, oh, I'm gonna try to be his friend and like win him over, and so that he can like mentor me and whatever, and then just like burst into tears when he's a total jerk.
Yes.
Yep.
Before we get away from the style thing, like I'm not saying anybody's wrong about like the silk stockings comparison and stuff like that, but my reaction, I guess, because I come at it as somebody that was, I immediately tie it into the horror genre, is I think it does awfully look like the first few seasons of Tales from the Crypt as well.
No, I agree. All of it has, there's an era of it, and that's why I find fascinating. I think it's that there's a decent amount of courtroom dramas that also have a very similar look from the it's just tied into, there's something about the lighting, probably the cameras that you get for the budget, etc. That just have it, just fits into that era, and it wasn't something I'd really thought about until I was watching it, and I just find it fascinating to when you see like a wall of different eras of movies, and then how they're how people, and I find it interesting too, because I've seen a few shows recently where they're color grading, not to what I find fascinating is you could do this and you would color grade you would up the contrast a little bit, you would up the brightness, the gamma a good bit to kind of do that. But I've noticed that I've seen a few pieces from different eras where they're color grading to photographs and faded film to invoke a memory association with what we think of that time period.
Oh yeah.
Not as much as what it looked like, but what we remember, because we remember through film and we remember through photos.
Good point.
So in order to elicit that emotional reaction, like if you wanted to do this now, you would color grade to that, like like I said, brighten the contrast, the makeup that's more flat, like Julia was saying, and that would evoke a perhaps 90s feel in a way that just putting people in period clothes isn't going to do.
Boy, is that true. That's so true. I was thinking about something else, which is that there are, in a way, there's many ways to watch a piece of older media, right, or vintage media, or whatever you want to call it, anything that's not new. Many ways, but there are two major ones that pop into my head. One is you can watch it and you can reject it and go, I don't, this doesn't really jive with the modern or the current contemporary way of doing things, and so I'm going to reject it. I don't like the acting style, I don't like the contrast, I don't like the color. Or you can watch it and go, oh, how interesting, this is showing me something about the period. It looks like other pieces of art from the period, and it lets me sort of understand where pieces of art go together, and I can't imagine not preferring to do it that way. It just strikes me as such a limited way to approach something and go, man, this thing looks dated. Because I would feel so much poorer if I turned my back on something because it looked like episodes of Tales from the Crypt.
I also think that the TV-ness of this, and I kind of touched on this when we were doing opening thoughts, is that it is so much more of it's like again, there's only a few characters, it's not a big story. That's true. It's a very interpersonal character study kind of thing. And films, there used to be films like that. If you go back to like the what they would call the golden age.
This is one of my favorite hobby horses, my friend. But go ahead. Yes.
But by the time the 90s came around, we were very thoroughly in the blockbuster era of filmmaking, and I think a script like this that is more character driven, they were regulated a lot of the time to being on TV, low budget movies, and I think though that's to the strength of this movie. Like I really like that it's only a few characters. You get very wrapped up in their workplace drama, and
honestly I love
stuff.
It to have just a few, and I will quibble just minorly with what you said, Drew, because it is true that already by the 90s there was a brisk business in TV movies that have been going on for a good long time for stuff of a more limited budget, and it feeds itself. That's very circular, right? But there was still in the 90s room for, Julia and I to go on a date and go see a courtroom thriller or whatever, or a law thriller, or a serial killer mystery that would have a limited number of characters. That was still a thing that people were going out to in the 90s, and it ain't so today. I mean, it's definitely not true in 2022. But in 97, definitely you could still go and what, the only things that are quote unquote smaller now are like Liam Neeson movies, and they're still pretty big. I mean, they still have a lot of action, but that's they're just far, and it's not like
I still think, though, if you were talking about like something like the Pelican Brief versus this,
yeah.
it's gonna end up having more characters.
Good
It's going to
pull.
end up having
Good
more.
pull on the Pelican Brief. Anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. I'm just saying, like, those types of movies that had a bigger budget, they always end up going bigger. And I'm not saying one is better than the other. It all ends up being, it just depends on how you use the ingredients.
It's funny that we're discussing this.
Really,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I really like the fact that this is again it's a very contained story.
I agree with you so much, and I was thinking it's funny that we're discussing this around a film that ultimately didn't come out in the theaters, but that was just an accident. It was intended to come out in the theaters.
No,
But
it did.
I am with
This
you
one came out in
completely.
the theaters. It just came out on HBO first. It came out on HBO 3
That's a
months
good point.
before.
Yeah,
and
which
then
is super weird, right? But that was not
Yeah.
their plan, and that definitely was not. That wasn't the ideal way to do it.
No.
That wasn't
Yeah,
what they
talk to
initially wanted.
Scarlett Johansson about
Yeah.
about
I mean,
doing
that stuff
TV
happens.
stuff.
But anyway, I mean, I wish, if I could have one wish for the movie industry, it would be that people would start
Thinking you're channeling Steve Martin. Go
Steve
ahead.
Martin, yes, but I would just really want people to start going to the movies for smaller movies again. And I think the reason they don't is because movies are expensive, right? But and there's movie tickets.
Well, and we
But
have giant screens in our own homes now, so
that's true. Yeah. I mean, I guess it's just choice. Because I guess I can't really articulate, like, Jason, what do you care? Why do you want to save the movie theaters? But I do. I really want to save the movie
well, the movie
theaters.
theaters are fine as long as people keep making, movies like the Top Gun Maverick and Star Wars movies and MCU movies, because those are, you kind of feel like you need to be in the big theater.
I guess that's
But
Yeah.
you're right that seeing small movies in the theater is not a thing that most of us prioritize because, like I say, we can watch them in the comfort of our own home.
Yeah, and if
Well,
you're
I also
Tarantino
think-
and you're
I
making
also
smaller
think
movies, you want people
TV
to go see them in the theater. I'm sorry, go ahead. Drew.
Oh, I think TV has kind of taken over the more quote unquote adult
Mhm.
drama
Mhm.
type things. Like,
But
like I do
That's
think
true.
it's interesting. Like we've been watching the Pistol, the Sex Pistol thing that
Mm.
Danny Boyle did, and it's interesting to me that a filmmaker like Danny Boyle is essentially doing a TV miniseries. When
Yeah.
I
think,
guess those are like high prestige now, and
And,
they are.
and that's actually one I was watching recently, and that one's color graded not only towards photos and movies, but British
Hmm.
shows from that time period.
No
if you
way.
look at the color grading and you look at how it's done, like I was really picking up on, oh, that's how, because we now have a subscription to BritBox, and so like I've seen what things look like, and I just it's fascinating that that's how we remember. That's our movies, in the same way that at some point in time, they did studies. I forgot where I read the study, but that people dream differently after the invention of movies.
Really?
Like the way that way that cinema and cutting and editing and such, and the way that we perceive those things has changed supposedly the way people dream. That could be.
I want to know more
I've only
about
read
that.
a couple
That
times.
is interesting.
But it was a while back when I was reading about it. But I'm with you, Drew, and I think there has been a consolidation. There are less art house theaters, especially there's a lot less of a lot of things since COVID is a thing, right? Since the start of the pandemic, there are a lot less of key areas of things that we take for granted, we took for granted. And art house theaters did less because if people are going to go to a theater, it is for a spectacle movie. I mean, luckily lately, one of those spectacle movies, my friend Josh helped re-release RRR in like
Yeah.
130 screens, and they had this big day of like, who would have thought like a movie from India? I mean, it's a huge, crazy 3-hour epic, insane piece of action, which is amazing. I wish I felt comfortable enough to go to the theater to see this. So that was in the theaters, and that was something like, hey, let's make this a spectacle. But people's choices were different as well. I know we're far afield from vampires and Cessnas, but
No,
that's part of it. But
we are talking about the world into which
Sure.
Night Flier was released, and I think that's really fascinating.
But we have less art house theaters for a variety of reasons. There's a lot of consolidation.
Yeah.
I don't want to turn into a TED talk about the actual movie industry, because I have a decent amount of friends who are in that area. From hanging out at Fantastic Fest and just the people we happen to hang out with. If you're in a theater all the time, you're probably going to meet some filmmakers or some people in the biz, right? And I've had some pretty good discussions with a lot of friends of mine exactly, with so much consolidation, and who controls what, and how booking works, all of that stuff has changed the nature of art house theater as well. So smaller budget things, but I think a lot of it is that choice of like, well, if I'm going to go see something, it better be worth my time. And those things, for better or worse, mass appeal, it does tend to be blockbuster size things, because you want the sound and you want to be immersed, and there's nothing wrong with that.
It's
sad. I want there to be, as a person who goes to Fantastic Fest and watches 40 movies in a week, I want there to be more genre. I want there to be more art house. I feel strongly that those voices are worth it. But the other side of it is, when you look at society as a whole and what we're seeing and how that is, like, I can lament, but I can't really blame people making those choices.
No. All right, let's leave that there, because we could spend we really a show its own on where we are today with like where different,
right,
because that's so interesting to me. But yeah, it's a fascinating rabbit hole. And I want to read the research on the dreaming being affected by Hollywood. But let's talk about vampires. Stephen King has done vampires before this movie. This is Night Flier. Night Flier is a variation of vampire from Stephen King, but he did certainly Salem's Lot had come out. Salem's Lot 2, the movie, had come out. This is something else. But Drew, you wanted to talk about this. So first of all, who is Dwight Renfield, and what is his very interesting modus operandi that I just find so fascinating?
Well, first things about this guy, he doesn't stay in one place. Like, his coffin, so to speak, is an airplane. And a
cool airplane. It's one of those cases where Stephen King obviously saw something in a catalog and was like, well, that's interesting.
His airplane's different. Like, there's not a black, I don't even know, other than outside of this movie, unless somebody's doing a homage, like, there's probably not a black Cessna in the same
Skymaster.
Yeah.
This was a very popular plane in Vietnam, by the way, just so you know. It was a military plane, but this one is a private version, painted black.
And it's colored like a Dracula cape.
Yes.
Which is great, and it's filled with his ancestral earth. And the fact that this vampire, is constantly on the go is kind of a cool way, because there's always the thing in these is you kind of have to, your belief that something like this would go unnoticed, where this is a good workaround, in that, he of course is still eventually getting noticed, otherwise we would have no story. But the idea that this vampire has worked this out, that he's just going to keep on the go, is cool.
But it's funny. Go ahead, Drew. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Well, what I'm going to say is going to change the subject, so you first.
Well, I do find it, and I think there was a story about this, but he's not quite rich enough, or doesn't use the resources to stay ahead of time zone. Like, if you had a fast enough jet, if you decided to be a world traveling vampire, you could stay ahead of the sun, more or less, probably.
Oh,
like
good idea.
If you had like a Concorde style, like, if you're rich enough, it would always be dark.
That's a wonderful idea.
By flying,
you could just follow the moon. You could just keep moving, and you could have 24 hours of nighttime. So yes,
but he's taken the lower rent route, and hey, I'm gonna fly all over, and the smaller the more obscure the airport, the better, because then I can just slaughter people.
Yes.
But yeah, I love that he doesn't need a ship anymore. This is his new ship. He's not gonna be on a ship anymore. He's gonna fly. Yeah, because I guess being a bat, your wings get tired. So
it's so brilliant because
Cessna.
you know that Steve. This is one of those times when Stephen King has just like his Legos are a cool plane that I'm sure he saw, and another weird ass thing that I don't think I've ever contemplated, ever, not once in my life before watching this, and that is that there exists in the northeastern United States a peculiar bunch of small community members who run tiny airports. That's like,
I mean, but you have to have those because
unknown to me.
Well, I went a couple times to the one. My grandfather had a cotton farm in Hearne, Texas, and guess what? Somebody's got all the crop duster planes.
Yeah,
and all the planes that do surveys, like if you do land surveys, all of those have to park somewhere, have to land, and that's where all of that happens.
It's pretty great,
regardless of just puddle jumping, kind of like, oh, well, I need to go to this town, so I'm going to charter a plane and go meet up with the city council of some tiny town somewhere. But also all of the stuff, surveys and point-to-point things, and then crop dusters, all that stuff has to land somewhere, and that's fascinating.
It makes me feel like I want to see more about this world. Like if you could imagine, Julie Entwisle plays a wannabe reporter here who becomes a hard-ass reporter by the end. But you could imagine Julie Entwisle instead being a woman who is, who has inherited her dad's hangar, in the first act of a film, and you just learn all about the way this world works. I was completely fascinated by these guys. They've all got little trailers next to the runway. They've got hangars. They've got they know one another, so that they'll make reference to other airports. They all speak with this very, very strange accent.
Well, it's that Maine accent that it's
the first guy, especially.
That guy's, he speaks just like the way Fred
accent.
Gwynn did in Pet Sematary.
Well, exactly.
That's
it's like
King,
the only person who highlights that accent is Stephen King, I think, or at least the only one who does it widely.
Before we get too far away from Dwight, I want to talk about, because this is also true in the short story. I am utterly charmed by the fact that he is like a classic movie vampire.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
Because that's just something vampires do. Like if you're a vampire, you're gonna wear evening wear and a cloak, and because those are the rules.
Yeah, that is amazing. Yeah,
and always remember to tuck your cloak in before you shut the plane door, or else you look like a fool flapping in the wind when you land. That's the one thing about cloaks. You gotta, I'm guessing he's been doing this for centuries, so he's probably got it down. But those are the hazards.
Drew has it right. It is charming. It's weird that he's into this. Because when you think about it, something that you have a fetish about is ultimately a weakness, right? It doesn't get exploited in this story at all. But the fact that he would want to go to the trouble of wearing a big cloak,
describe him as that it's odd that he's wearing a cape, like it
makes
him stand out when he's trying to not be noticed. But at the same time, like it kind of makes you wonder if there's like a vampire rule book that you get, like in Beetlejuice, where they give a handbook for the recently deceased. Is there like something for vampires?
Well, I mean, it's possible that, first of all, Stephen King always likes to bring out the ironic humor in everything. And I mean, and one of the things that we know from classic vampire crap is that they are compulsive, that they
absolutely.
So there's a lot of folklore about, you can slow down a vampire by like, putting a puzzle in their way or throwing down a bunch of seeds, and they feel they need to count them. So this guy has a compulsion. He's gonna like put a red pinstripe on his plane, and he's gonna wear this Broadway cloak. Like,
although he keeps his plane pretty nasty, which is kind of,
well, that's the other thing.
Gross.
He's not compulsive about cleanliness at all.
That's for sure.
He's the opposite. He's like super mucky. There's gunk and
bless him for the name Dwight Renfield, which is just that's that's amazing. Like that
it's an adopted name. We know that.
It's interesting though that he exists in a world, because we know this because he adopted the name Dwight Renfield. He exists in a world where Dracula movies exist.
Right.
Yeah.
So does he dress like this because, you know, this is how vampires dress, or is he dressed like this because he has a sense of humor about
Yeah, that'd be
himself?
awesome. Like, well, for a long time he's like, well, nobody's gonna know because I kill everybody I come across.
Yeah.
And then there is like, I kind of hope it is the like, what do you get? You're never gonna believe that was me, right? Like, and there was this guy with a cloak. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
what?
That's true.
A guy flying a man with a Cessna in evening clothes and a cloak. What are you smoking? Like, it's like they'll never believe that a vampire is traveling in a Cessna dressed as a vampire. Who would?
Dressed as a vampire. Yes.
Like, come on.
And I think as a 30s farmer, he definitely liked, because he has pictures of himself. And I think he saw Bela Lugosi and it's like, that's how to do it. And that's how he did it. So how does this compare to the Stephen King vampires in Salem's Lot? You have the smart
Well, they're
ones.
Nosferatus, right? Like,
Well, one was,
Well,
and the rest of them were a bunch
one
of.
in the movie is a Nosferatu. In the actual book, the character is much more. The whole character is actually like a handsome older guy and is actually much more
Yeah.
Christopher Lee-esque.
Sure.
But you know, the thing that both this does and Salem's Lot does is, you know, because you're talking about the griminess of Dwight Renfield. You know, the thing that King is really fascinated by is that idea of vampirism as death and disease.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I think that they're as different as they are, because this is, again, it's a much smaller, more contained story than Salem's Lot. There is that overlapping theme, like this.
Yeah, because you've got the maggots in the dirt, and you've got the face that's totally, you know, monstrous once we actually see the vampire. So yeah, there's definitely that death and disease. I love that that he also doesn't have a reflection, you know, like, and
Right,
so whenever so that actually the scene where he's peeing blood and you're just seeing a urinal fill up with blood, that was so gross but also so creative. I was just like,
it's very
Oh,
creative.
yeah.
wow, very interesting. And then he's just like going through, and Miguel Ferrer never turns around to look behind him. He's just like seeing all this stuff all the stuff that's happening, like all the mirrors getting shattered and whatever. That was all very interesting. So yeah, I like the way this vampire has some of the elements of classic vampires, like you said, the cloak and everything. But the holes that he makes in people are big and deep, not the two like fang holes like they traditionally have. And he doesn't turn into a bat. He does apparently turn into a dog. That dog thing was crazy, where the dog's on top of the roof.
That was very interesting. I think that dog was instead bewitched. I think that was.
Well, but how did it magically get back up on the roof again?
I think it just, I don't know, moved.
I don't know.
Fast.
That was interesting.
Well,
people don't know that he can't turn into a bat. Like it's never.
But we don't see it. Is my point. And he doesn't fly around. He flies in a Cessna instead of flying as a bat. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a Cessna could still. I mean, your arms would be very tired.
I kind of like the idea of sometimes he is a bat flying the Cessna. That would be amazing.
Somehow that makes me think of the Bugs Bunny cartoon, where for some reason they keep turning into things, and there's point.
You know, the interesting thing is about the flying thing is that there's another story called Popsy that Stephen King does, and he alleges that the vampire in that story is also the same as Flyer. And that vampire definitely can fly. So maybe you're right, Jason. Maybe he just does this because it's a way to get around.
I mean, I can run, but I still drive. So yeah, it's.
Well, I also, I like also that they tie in kind of the Dracula Eternal Love thing when they find his photographs.
Yeah.
And this is when we find this out after, we put all together after there's a woman who's just extremely smitten with him and changes her haircut and everything. And then we see that, and that was great.
To be getting younger. So
I
always wonder if he's not vamping her, and then but then why would he kill her is the question.
Well, he's got to move on because there's only
Yeah.
so long you can stay in a town.
But yeah,
Yeah.
he did,
I thought that was
like
great.
a Hitchcock kind of thing. He made her start to change her hair to be kind of like his former spouse,
Yeah.
and that's just fascinating. So he's moving. The plot is this vampire has been reported moving up and down around New England. He never sticks around long enough to get caught by the police. Sometimes when he does, he's protected by the people at the airports. Then he kills them, and
Well,
these
I
two
think
young.
even if the police show up, he probably just because he seems to have this ability to immediately put people under his spell.
Yeah, he can cloud
Because
men's minds like the
every
shadow. Yeah,
airport has that FAA thing that says, be on the lookout for this Cessna, and every time they never report it. So
yeah.
clearly, as soon as he shows up, they're under his spell. So I
Well,
think
that's also a very classic vampire movie thing that we don't see. The idea that vampires are hypnotic, like it's not done as much anymore.
Agreed.
Like
Yeah.
something I was like thinking a lot about is like, not that this guy is specifically Dracula, but it plays off of a lot of Dracula tropes. Is that like whenever somebody tries to trot out, modern Dracula, there's a lot of this time like where they want to make Dracula into this like super vampire. Whereas like if you get into the abilities that Dracula has in the actual novel, he has like a ton of crazy superpowers that we don't really see used in vampire movies that much anymore. Hypnotism being, a pretty big one of them, especially.
But it was a favorite back in the day, right? I mean, that would be the one
like Bela Lugosi loved to hypnotize people.
Yes. And
well, and that's what makes him so sexy. I mean, that's what makes Dracula so sexy is the idea that anybody, anybody is suddenly under his spell and wants him. They're only victimized because they're victims of this
it's
the
deliciously
psychological
problematic, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
they're only victims because they're victims of the psychological hold.
There's a
but they never
delightful.
seem like victims. Mm-hmm.
I want to talk a little bit about the tabloid world. So Tony was bringing up the tabloids as presented here are sort of the what the Reddit is the inheritor of this, because there's the question of why does a tabloid want to go to the trouble of publishing a bunch of stories that aren't true? Because Miguel Ferrer, and I'm telling you, a lot of it doesn't make any sense at all, but I think there's some reality to it. Miguel Ferrer has this philosophy that he tells to Julie Entwisle, where he says, it's something like, don't believe what you print, don't print what you believe. And meaning I publish fiction. And the strange thing is, therefore, what's the point of him even having an expense account? Because he's still chasing stories.
So he does go into it because everything that they print is based on a thread of reality. And so then, like, you see what he does is he goes, okay, so this story is interesting, so I'm going to show up, but I'm going to go to where this guy has been buried, and I'm going to tilt the tombstone and replace the flowers with dead flowers and put a bloody handprint on there. So it's like, okay, the real thing is this other thing that I'm looking at, but I'm going to change it to make it more whatever we're trying to get, So that's what he means. He doesn't mean make stuff up out of whole cloth. He means take what you have and then adapt
and so
it.
the question is, like, why? I mean, like the people who put crazy things on the internet when pressed on why do you do this? Do you do this because you're a white supremacist or a racist? And the answer is often yes. But the answer they'll give you is, oh, I do it because it's funny. It's funny to fool people. It's funny to get people to believe things.
Well, in this case, we end up with creepypasta as a thing.
Yes.
Yeah. Exactly.
Right. Like this stuff was the new wave of that was creepypasta stories.
Yeah.
And
hey, did you know that there are airports out there where vampires?
Yeah, all of that stuff became Weekly World News ceases, and eventually, decade or two later, creepypasta, for example, fills the way. And there's many, and you're right with Reddit, but that kind of storytelling and how and I mean, he's literally doing, when we say tabloid journalism, that's what he's doing. Like It's called that for a reason. It's not gonna be you take the picture of the grave, okay. Oh yeah. Now kick the grave and add a bloody handprint. Now you're talking. This is some tabloid right here.
Well, and what I love is that the tabloids that they have on the wall are actually all based on, or at least a lot of them are based on Stephen King stories.
Oh, really?
Did you guys know that?
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, that was good.
I was just
Actually.
reading the
That was good.
IMDb, and it's like, okay, the bylines by Richard are, one is Spring Hill Jack Strikes Again, which is Strawberry Spring. Another
Uh-huh.
is Headless Lamaze Leads to Successful Birth. The Breathing Method is the story. Kitty cultists in Kansas worship creepy voodoo god, Children of the
Well,
Corn.
there you go. Yeah.
Satanic shopkeeper sells gory goodies, needful things. Naked demons leveled my lawn, the lawnmower man. The ultimate killer diet, gypsy curse flays fat lawyer's flesh thinner.
So that
So
all,
that's awesome.
all of that means, the people involved, whether it was, from director, somebody in the production department, art direction, decided, well, if we're gonna do tabloids, why don't we all keep it in the Stephen King universe? And that's some genius level movie stuff right there.
Yes.
You don't
Well,
have
they
to do that.
also
You could have.
name
I mean, you
drop
could have.
Barry.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, exactly. But I mean, that's good stuff, man.
Yeah,
That's
no, I
why
agree.
it's like you got because you got to plan that. You could have just as easily done a ton of different other tabloid things,
Yeah,
and it would have
you're
been
absolutely right.
just as good, right? But the fact that they did that's the stuff I like.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that.
And
That's
why
the
not
kinda-
keeping it in universe? I mean, that's and when you don't have to, that's great. Like I love bits like that. That just really sells it all to me.
I found it fascinating that the story actually follows a very conventional outline form, but compared with today, where the so-called save the cat outline is sort of what everybody uses. One thing that means is that your main character always at the beginning has to do something nice. The concept of save the cat is have your main character do something nice in the first few pages so that everybody goes, oh yeah, well, no matter what I see him do for the rest of the first act, I know that he's basically a good guy at heart. That is not the case.
Oh no,
This
definitely
character.
not. I mean, this guy. I mean, he's an ambulance chaser.
He's a
Do
schmuck.
whatever he
Right.
can do. Like he's. I mean, moving
Well, I expected
moving
him to be
bodies around.
redeemed.
Ugh.
Yeah.
I expected him to be redeemed at the end, but I expected that he would have to save the girl. But in fact, that's not at all how this goes.
Right.
No.
Yeah. I mean, so
He actually becomes even a bigger jerk.
he's a deliberately unlikable main character, unless you just want to instead just kind of enjoy Miguel Ferrer doing his thing, being
Well,
a
he
great
does
performer.
excel at playing these kinds of characters. Like he played
Boy.
a lot of them.
I hope that Miguel Ferrer was actually a happy guy when he was at home, and that he was just like, oh no, that's just a part I play. Because boy, he is good at
I
playing.
mean,
lonesome
again, how
people.
could you be the son of Rosemary Clooney and not have at least a good sense
By-
of humor, if nothing
By
else?
most accounts, he sounds like he was actually a nice man, but yeah, he played a lot of a-holes in his day.
His dad was a actor, famous actor, Jose Ferrer, who's also a famous director. So this guy is like Hollywood royalty, really. That is just so funny to me, is how, what a world of privilege and influence Miguel Ferrer was coming from, and was able to play these just angry people who you could tell, that if you were unlucky enough to wind up drinking next to Miguel Ferrer, his character here, he was going to tell you just some, just no, let me tell you how it really works, and then
Or just tell you to fuck off.
The unsavoriness of D's in this movie is one of the reasons why I like it. Because like I sort of hate the idea of save the cat. Like even though I'm totally guilty of doing it, like at times
it's really just the same 3-act structure that everybody's been using forever.
Yeah.
But yeah,
but I like it when things rebel against that, and this definitely is a magnetic character. Like you're immediately drawn in with him, but he is in no way, shape, or form a nice character. And I like the fact that I get to spend an hour and a half in this guy's mindset, even though like he's somebody that if I were to meet him in real life, I he was an asshole, and I probably would want to deck him.
Do you
It definitely
remember-
makes the end a little bit more palatable that he's such a jerk. You don't feel as bad
Yeah.
for him.
Well, that's also sort of the Tales from the Cryptness of this,
Right.
is that the a-hole character gets his comeuppance in the end.
Right. No,
Yeah.
that's totally true. That there's like a cosmic. There's
Well-
often a sort of cosmic justice going
But what
on.
you don't expect, and another thing it subverts and then subverts again, is that you don't expect her to become his protege in
Yeah.
every way and be so unsympathetic and like, hey, well, hey, thanks for leaving it open for me to be a
Yeah.
jerk now. Like that.
Yeah, she
that was
totally
something.
embraces his just make shit up attitude and like
Yeah.
decides that even though she knows the truth because she sees
Cessna.
the vampire walking toward the Cessna and leaving, she goes ahead and writes that he's the killer, he's the
Yeah,
Night
because
Flier.
it makes a good front page.
Well,
And
and
that's what
it closes everything up. It like ties
Sure.
it all up with a bow.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
And I think that's another thing that it does really well at subverting that, because you don't exactly expect that, because up until now she's kind of been a little bit naive. We see her kind of again turn more gothy in the way she dresses and stuff like that, and become more hardcore. I'm gonna do this. Hey, let's partner up and all of that. And then by the end, she's like, well, oh yeah, that's totally. I caught the Night
And
Flyer.
it's also the only thing that makes sense. I mean, okay, so if
Sure.
we could, I know there's other stuff that we haven't talked about, but if we could talk about the end a little bit.
Yeah. Well,
fact
we should talk
is-
about the end. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, the fact is that he gets lured basically to the airport that
In Wilmington,
in Wilmington.
I presume
that-
North Carolina. I don't
That,
know of other Wilmingtons.
that our vampire is at, and then he's killed the crap out of everybody. So Miguel Ferrer's character is taking pictures of everything in the plane. He takes pictures of the the photo book with the pictures of him with his spouse, and all the stuff like the maggots and everything. Then he goes in and he sees just the carnage and just a crazy amount of blood everywhere. He slips and falls at one point on the blood, goes into the bathroom to throw up, and that's when the vampire's in the mirror, but you can't see him. He can't see his reflection, etc. So then, at one point, he gets killed by the vampire, sort of, or like he gets bitten by him. And so now he starts, like that's what I said, he goes into this thriller video where he starts to see the spirits of these people as like zombies coming toward him. And
Mhm.
and there's like the room is suddenly night vision and it's filled with smoke or steam, and
Yeah.
it's just really weird scene. And so he gets an axe off of the break glass in case of emergency, and starts just hacking at all the bodies when the cops show up. So I
Right.
mean, really there's no other way to explain the whole scene except to say that he's obviously the
Except
Night Flier.
that it seems well. Who knows? Yeah, he's gonna go down for it. That's a perfect shorthand. I think in reality, who knows? It sure seems weird. It seems unlikely that he could kill an entire airport. Just
It
one
doesn't
guy
really
with an
matter.
axe.
The point is
but-
that it's nice and neat, and like I said, you can tie it with a
Right.
bow, and she can have her story
Yeah.
instead of being the crazy person who's like, "Well, no,"
And he's
what
shot
did-
to death.
it's
So
just-
it
he's shot to death by the cops, so he can't defend himself. But she's also really mad because he's totally fucked her over. Like he tied her. He
Oh,
locked
absolutely.
her into a
Yeah.
closet after telling her that they were going to share the byline. So she's also really mad at him.
And
I mean, so many things. I mean, for one thing, this ending is a perfect example of that same cynicism we've talked about from this era. I mean, it's petering out at this era, but where hey, that nothing's the truth, right? And that the cops always lie, and the detectives always lie, and the lawyers lie, and the press lies, and so this fits into that cynicism of well, everything you see is just a simplified explanation for whatever the real truth is.
there's also always the chance, and I don't really think this is it, but you could also read it as she sees Dwight Renfield fly away, that's his final hypno push.
Fair, you could do that
You-
one.
I think it leans more towards the cynical, but if you wanted the fact that he's able to vamp hypno so many different people,
Yeah.
and he does that just to get Dee's killed as well, because he drags him to hell. He puts him in hell, and all he can see is that's why he takes an axe. He's not really seeing all of that. Like that's not really what's happening.
Yeah.
But to him it is. So he's able to extend his hypno powers all over the place.
Yeah.
I think, to me, the read is she sees this is how it's done for this paper. I learned a lot from a protege, but there's always the chance that was his final Jedi mind trick, on the way
Absolutely.
out.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's a good point. I wanted to mention also that there's two things. One, I love the scene in the middle where exactly as Julia was talking about. It leads you to believe that you've moved into an era of cooperation, that these two are working the case,
And he's
and
going
it's
to be
almost
Oh
redeemed.
yeah.
it's a montage, and as a viewer, this is to Pavia's credit, right? You settle into, oh, I get where we are now. We're in, now they're partners,
Yeah, he's not a bad guy after all.
right.
Right.
And so it is wonderfully subversive in that way.
If it was
like,
a series, you would get those like, hey, a couple episodes, and then the twist would be at the end of one episode, he turns and takes off, and like, that jerk, right? And
exactly,
we do get
yes.
that. We get
and
that in a
it's
shorter
worse. Like, I
version
thought
of that,
that's what
yeah.
happened. I thought when she
Yeah.
comes back in his room and he's gone, that he just took off. No, he doesn't just take off. He literally grabs her with a blanket, stuffs her in the closet, and locks her in there. What an
Pretty
asshole!
weird. Yeah, that seems a little extreme.
I mean, it's not really for him though. This is the guy who's willing to knock over tombstones and move people, move bodies around at a wreck.
Well,
So
she's still a good enough person that she's trying to give him the benefit of the doubt and going, it's the case. You told me that the previous woman who killed herself, the case got to her inside her head or whatever. It's this, it's all the vampire. No, this guy's just an ass.
Yeah,
for real.
So, all right. So that brings us probably to our final thoughts.
I do want to.
Is there anything you'd like to talk about that we haven't talked about?
Yeah, I do want to talk about his look, because up until a point we get the idea that when Dees turns around, he's going to see a Christopher Lee vampire, or at least a Dracula, powerful like Jack Palance Dracula, based on his voice. But instead, we get a creature, and not really well done creature that drops is able to dislocate his jaw and
has this giant fang that makes the big hole.
He's scary.
Yeah. Awesome. I mean, that, and really well done. Again, like,
and he can be both. He can appear as the creature,
right?
Or he can appear as this really handsome guy, nice guy that people want to have over for dinner.
Yeah, that's great, because at every turn there's a little bit of subverting what you kind of expect of things, and that's not always, especially when you watch a lot of movies, that's not always something that to be surprised or to go, oh, that's cool, it's not always easy, right? Like, you don't always encounter that in a way that works like this movie does. And I thought that was great. Like I said, every bit of money on effects is up there. I mean, there's a lot of great gory business in this.
Oh, absolutely. Film. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, he's repulsive. It is interesting how much Stephen King is leaning into the notion that if vampires existed, they would be, in a way, if you really got to look at them, they would be repulsive to us. Of course they would.
And that's how his in-universe evil works, because if you read, if you go through Dark Tower as well, the vampires and kind of undead of through his whole Stephen King universe, which he basically makes a grand unified version of that, and those creatures throughout that are this diseased, depraved undead.
Yeah, and they're always, because they operate at they're different from us. They're not humans. They don't appreciate the things we appreciate, And in a way, when you think about it, Miguel Ferrer's character's inability to be nice or to be compassionate towards Julie Entwile's character means
or
that
anybody at all.
He's already kind of stepped out of where normal humans are,
And that's partially why I think Dwight Renfield gives him a little bit of the, like, hey, give me your camera, we'll kind of forget about this. Like, you're one of the few humans who's really kind of sussed this out. There's an element of the classic kind of cat and mouse Dracula, where he's lived so long that he doesn't always encounter a human who can maybe not even best him, but at least come close.
Yes.
And so there's a little bit of that. All right, look, I can't have you messing up a good thing that I've got going. But give me your camera.
I'm gonna let you go.
Give me a camera. Well, and leave, and don't ever try this again. But you did pretty well for a human.
And then he's
For
like, "I've
what
got to
it's
see you."
worth, that's where the story ends.
Right,
Huh.
right.
Like
Yeah.
you don't have the whole sequence where he's hallucinating vampires and chopping up dead bodies with an axe in the
Right.
short
Yeah.
story.
That's not the short story ends there.
Yeah.
It ends
Oh.
with the vampire compensating his film, and he's just
Fascinating.
sort of mentally broken
Uh-huh.
by the experience of learning that vampires are real.
Right.
Oh my
And
gosh.
He's still left in a slaughterhouse of a airport, right? If I
But he's
remember
not
Well, I
correctly.
mean,
necessarily going to
the
go down
Hollywood
for it.
the ending that we get is obviously something that's they choose it because it's better on film. It's a sort of
Right.
more exciting.
and he gets a
ending.
more thorough comeuppance, which I think,
Sure.
given his actions, you sort of want.
Yeah,
I'm with you.
fascinating. Okay. Is there anything else that we should touch on? I think we've hit probably most of it.
Yeah, we can get to it in the closing.
All right, cool. All right. So let's get to our final thoughts. And Julia, in fact, you just spoke, and it is your turn once again.
Yeah, so I'd say what I want to add is yes. So I think Tony or Drew, I think it was Tony, mentioned the gore. One of you guys did, and yes, it's very gory, and of course, I'm not a fan of gore, so that is definitely a turnoff for me. But anybody who likes good gore effects will enjoy this. I also wanted to mention what I don't think talked about is the score, if you can even call it that, the sounds, like the sound production. There is constantly these like weird high pitched noises and everything. It's very unnerving, which I thought was really cool
And
because most of the time I was just kind of like, what is that? Like I was just kind of be like, what is that sound? Is that the score or is there an engine or what's going on? What were you gonna say, Tony?
it does also have a really contemporary soundtrack overall.
Yeah.
Like the bands and music that he chooses are definitely there's a little bit of kind of industrial stuff. There's a lot of heavy music of the time that I had forgotten about. It's like, oh yeah, this band's in here, and this it's a soundtrack that I remembered bits of when I rewatched it this time, but found myself going, oh yeah, wow, he uses a lot of like bands in there that I had forgotten about, and that was fascinating as well because getting bands to sign on and doing the soundtrack stuff, all that licensing, hopefully
Yeah.
you get people and everything like that. So I guess he was probably in with enough people, but it was a soundtrack that I had not remembered about how contemporary it was. And then especially because a lot of King movies, other than maybe Maximum Overdrive, tend to tug on their King. They tend to use the things that King might have touched on, so they tend to go a almost more nostalgic route.
Oh, absolutely. For his era,
right?
Like
Whereas
yeah,
Pavia has decided, well, I'm making this film and I'm going to put in the music that or whoever's doing the licensing and stuff. Depends. Sometimes it's the director directly. Some have it. It'd be different if I could ask these questions, but a lot of directors will tend towards the stuff that they're digging on. And I get the impression possibly that was this, but it was really interesting because you do have to license all that and everything. Go, I'm going to make this a really this year or this past couple of years style soundtrack. It was an interesting choice because not every King movie has that directly. So, but I agree with you on the soundscape of things. There was a lot of interesting soundscape in addition to the kind of score parts that weren't contemporary music.
So there's, like I say, a lot of unnerving pieces to it. Some really creative choices, some interesting directorial choices, and cinematography. The performances for me in this one were the least compelling. I think of all the things in the film. I just, like I say, sometimes I felt like Miguel Ferrer was doing great, and other times it just felt really overdone. The creature is good, but the voice actor, not necessarily my favorite either. So yeah, I think for me the performances were the least of it, but not bad. It's just not my favorite part. But yeah, there's a lot of really interesting things about it. Just the beginning is a little off for me, a little slow, but yeah, the end was really interesting and unexpected, which is for me a big deal because I tend to go through movies just going, yeah, I knew that was coming, or I know what's coming next. And this one, I was like, oh, that's not what I expected. So I always
excellent point.
enjoy that.
Yeah.
Anyway, yep. Thanks. Good conversation.
Very cool. Drew, What are your final thoughts for this movie?
I actually really like Miguel Ferrer in this. Like I think it's interesting because the guy didn't really play a whole lot of leads, so I just think it's fun
That's a good point.
to see him as the main character of something. I think this is kind of a fun, underrated, under talked about King adaptation, and it's one that I've brought up every time we've been on the subject of Stephen King. I've brought up doing this for a
Good.
few years now, so I'm glad that we finally
Me too.
done it. Good conversation. Enjoyed revisiting the movie.
Excellent. Tony, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed the movie. It was great to revisit it. I hadn't seen it in, more than a few years, so that was kind of cool. I'd seen it a couple times I knew in the past, and probably when it was on cable, because once I got cable, it was cable all the time.
Yeah.
Having not grown up with it. So as soon as it became once you get, some form of basic cable in an apartment that had, HBO or whatever, of course, I'll watch whatever is on. And then, like I said, it's kind of fun to revisit. I did have some nostalgia for all the crazy Weekly World News stuff that from when I was in college. And
Yeah.
I talk. It's funny too because I talk a lot about our kind of like irony-based economy and how it done. And yet here I am, an ironic college student. Ha ha ha! Look at this. Weekly World News is hilarious. So maybe the joke's on me, but I like. I think it's great. Drew pointed out you don't get him as much as a lead, so
That's true.
That's really cool. I like the twists. I think the makeup. I mean, they did a great job. I like the idea of this would be an era where tabloid journalist in this kind of makes a cool that's a cool side job to expound upon. Later we see it in again kind of ironic, like, oh, the tabloids are really telling us this, like in Men in Black, where they hide things in tabloid style papers or whatever. We see it in a different light, but having somebody who's willing to go the distance for, arguably when tabloids were around, especially, the Weekly World News style of more supernatural, not just about celebrities, that's a pretty select audience too. So deciding like, hey, we're going to have this guy who's willing to be hardcore about this paper that is, and that's why he's so hardcore about it, right? Don't publish what you believe because this is all just bunk. But I'm going to make the best version of bunk I could possibly make. I think that's cool. Cool take on vampires, a good mix of classic and contemporary bits with the Cessna. And hewing closely to the story, to the original story, while still being an adaptation that takes it in different places. Because you have to adapt, especially when it's a short story. I think all the stuff, none of it feels to me like filler, which sometimes can happen.
Mm-hmm.
And way different than perhaps like the Lawnmower Man, which has nothing to do other than the title.
No, I know.
The story at all, right? So
no, this feels like a really good, close Stephen King adaptation.
And we get classic, like we talked about before. We get a classic King, East Coast accent at the when we need it, just to kind of set the tone. Like you're firmly in King land, right?
In New England.
New England style. I mean, that's great. So it was a great one to revisit. It would be nice if Shout Factory, if you don't own the Blu-ray or DVD, it's a lot harder to find. So I do recommend, and that's always the way I prefer. Always prefer to. I've seen some, if you don't have it, there's Blu-rays and DVDs around, but it is a lot harder to find than it probably should be. It would make a great Shout disc for sure. In fact, I had to look up because I was like, I thought Shout did this, but guess not. But
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, well, if we do get a chance to talk to some people involved with this, we can find out. Because in my experience, when you suddenly look around in a film that should be out is not out, it usually means it will be out soon. I mean, I just like there are movies that I'm always looking for on like Real Good and other searches of the streaming APIs. And whenever they disappear, it always means that they're moving. Like usually they're moving like to Tubi or Pluto or something like that. But you never know. Okay, rather than a final thought, because I just want to adopt everything that you guys said. But I do want to share this thing that I found about Miguel Ferrer from Krista Bell, who was an actress who worked with him on Twin Peaks. And he said that there was this point where they were acting together. She was very new, and she said, he knew that I was new at acting and a bit over my head. Anyway, there's this point where she had to do a scene, and she felt nervous about it. Afterwards, she goes, Miguel turned to me and said, "You really did a good job with that line. I saw it in the script, and I was glad I didn't have to say it. It was a tough one." And instantly, my anxieties about my performance were lessened. And that's that kind of menschiness of just like being willing to make another actor feel better says a lot about a person. Also,
Mhm.
curiously, didn't drink alcohol. I mean, did earlier, but at this point, didn't drink alcohol, didn't drink caffeine, didn't eat between meals. So he would drink only water on the set just to stay hydrated. And
It's a super healthy dude.
yeah, super healthy guy. So yeah, interesting guy. Yeah, Hollywood royalty of the most impeccable degree. Yes. So cool. All right. Speaking of, like, I scan Roku for things that I can't find. I'm hoping are coming to streaming. What have you guys been watching? Let's get our endorsements for this week. Stuff that you've been listening to or watching or whatever. Starting with Julia. Julia. I know that you've been watching so much stuff. What
Yeah,
are you
Jason.
going
Yeah,
to tell us
Jason
about?
called it an avalanche of television that we've suddenly gotten, like all these amazing
That was not my term. For
series.
what it's worth, that was
Where
something that a lot of people are calling it.
Yeah,
Is the
it's
TV
amazing. No,
avalanche.
there's just so much. But first, we got to start with, of course, I mean, it's not, I'm certainly not going to be adding anything new to this conversation. But Top Gun Maverick is the most exciting film that I've seen in forever. I don't remember a more exciting film. It's just so fun to watch in the big screen, in the theater on the big screen with the rumbly seats. It's just fantastic. The plot, not the plot, the script is not perfect, but boy, they really make up for it with all of the work that's been put into the effects and all the actors learning how to fly those jets, and it's just incredible. So that's number one. But yeah, as far as series go, gosh, we've been watching The Lincoln Lawyer on Netflix, which is really great and a lot of fun. I really love the performances in that, and I've been watching the Martha Mitchell story with Julia Roberts, Gaslit. Which is
Yeah.
on Stars, and that's really, really good too. It's really interesting angle on Watergate. I know that people who were old enough to remember Watergate when it was happening know who Martha Mitchell is, but people from our generation and later really don't know that much about her. So that's been really
I
fascinating.
certainly don't. I mean, this was all news.
Yeah.
This was all new to me. And if I were a Watergate geek, maybe I would know about it, but I wasn't. So yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So I'll limit it to those, but there's so many good series that I've been watching. It's been really fun.
Very cool.
Yep.
Thank you so much. Drew, what do you got for us?
Well, first and foremost, I got a 1 month free thing on Apple TV,
Hmm.
which I was happy to get, because it allowed me to watch Prehistoric Planet, which is a new speculative documentary about dinosaurs, which is impeccably researched and has probably the best dinosaur special effect that I have seen since the original.
What did you
Jurassic
call it
Park.
again? One more time.
Prehistoric Planet.
Prehistoric
And
Planet. Okay.
yeah, John Favreau is one of the producers on it. It's actually got a soundtrack by Hans Zimmer. It's really cinematic, but just beautiful. And as much as I love movie monster dinosaurs, I also love seeing them portrayed more as animals. So this definitely tickles that particular bone, and it's really, really, really cool if you are a dinosaur geek like I am. The other thing that I watched was on Peacock. It's a rom-com series, actually, called Wolf Like Me. It's got what is that actor's name? Isla Fisher is the one of the main, and Josh Gad is the other. And it's about a single parent who starts to fall in love with this mysterious woman that he meets through a car accident, and she also happens to be a werewolf. And the werewolf stuff is peppered throughout the entire show, but because this is a horror podcast, I think I probably should state that even though I really enjoyed it, like, don't go in expecting like wall werewolf action. Although when you finally get to it, it is definitely worth the wait. But you don't get like a full-on werewolf attack until the final episode. So it's definitely like a slow burn as far as the monster elements. So, but it's also a charming romantic comedy that also has to deal with the grieving process. So I like that aspect of it. It's like the movie we discussed tonight. It's very character driven, and I find that TV does that very well, and so I really enjoyed it. So those are my. I've watched a bunch of this week, but I'm going to save my other endorsements for inevitably what we would do next.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you very much, Tony. What about you?
Several things. I mean, I watched The Northmen, which was really great. Beautifully filmed. Definitely more violent. Rain definitely didn't want to watch it.
Yeah.
It's more violent, but I think it would make a great, like, you want to do a double feature. They're different, but you could add that flavor with the kind of, even I would say, more art house, The Green Knight. If you kind of want, like, there's some thread there that I kept thinking about. I always like to pair up things. And I also finally got to watch the new 4K UHD of Escape from New York. Boy, does it look awesome on it, especially on a projector. Like, it looks cool. It made me wish I had an Atmos set up as well, because there's an option for that. So I wish, yeah.
My favorite special effect from that movie is in the opening, the crawl where they're going through, and it's supposed to be a computer generated.
Oh yeah, where they painted the set, like,
so they painted a wire model.
Yeah.
Of the
amazing,
of the city in a phosphorescent green.
Yeah,
and then
that's all of that stuff.
That's great.
Now it's kind of funny to me sometimes. I'm watching it again. What they think is the future, because still, like, the transponder they hand him is like this thing that's still about the size of a walkie-talkie.
Yes.
Yes. It's funny what you extrapolate, like what is the future, and then, like, well, surely no one would make a thing the size of an iPhone, right? But also, I was thinking about that because I just watched this last night. There's also a protagonist that you like. I mean, he's more likable perhaps than a guy who's willing to kick over a tombstone.
Yes.
But he's still not a guy who's a nice guy.
Right. He's a true anti-hero. He really is. Yeah.
We still root for him in a different way. But I was watching that, and that was just fantastic to see in 4K. I mean, I like film, the studios that are, because 4K coming from film, if it's done correctly with not a lot of noise reduction and kind of messing with it, and a decent restoration, you tend to have a better 4K experience than if it's kind of filmed, especially if it wasn't filmed in 4K, digitally. Then you have to do all kinds of trickery. It can still work, but classics that are on film. And then also, I actually had a 3D double feature at a friend of mine's house where their kids had never seen 3D, so I showed them
cool
Creature from the Black Lagoon in 3D. And if you
good choice,
get a chance to watch that, and then we also watched the disc that Drew and I had watched with Friday the 13th 3, and that Shout Factory, I think it was Shout, right, Drew, that did the box set?
Yeah.
That restoration of that and in 3D is just, now it's expensive to set up 3D. So again, here I am speaking from a place of like, hey, if you have this set up, but it is, and Creature in 3D is just an experience that it's planned so well in a way that I hadn't thought about until I saw it in 3D. And the way that, when they're underwater, the way light rays work, in 3D and all the particulate that's in and it's great. And also introducing kids to 3D, where his youngest was like, I want to touch the bubbles, I'm gonna clap at the creature, like, and
right.
The fact he had to get off, like, he wanted to get off the couch to go towards it rather than, it's gonna be the same no matter where you're at, spatially.
Sure.
But seeing, a kid go, oh, I got to get closer. And we're like, hey, get back on the couch, like, so everybody can, don't get in front of the projector, that kind of thing.
That's great.
That was
Oh,
great.
that's
That was a great experience. Kids, it looks great, and I'll watch it anytime in 3D. But introducing that to kids, and and they love classic Universal horror. He's kind of raised them right, so that was kind of neat. If you're able to ever see it, I highly recommend watching Creature from the Black Lagoon in 3D. And of course, Friday the 13th 3, I think, is my favorite Friday the 13th movie. So
I love
seeing
that
in 3D.
film. I really want to see. So I definitely would love to see Friday the 13th 3D in actual. Go to the movies and see it in 3D. That would.
Well, we've seen it, but the thing is that print that's on the Blu-ray
Mhm.
is really good, because I've seen it at the Draft House like 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
And their print is
I
good.
must have, because that sounds like
we've
something...
seen it. We've seen it.
Yeah.
Their print is good. Like it looks great, right? And it's in the theater, and that's amazing. Like, I'll never, to me, you can't replace the theater experience.
Let me ask you if you remember something. So when we watched Miss Sadie Thompson, which was originally in 3D, 1953 movie, we watched it at the Button-Omathon. Did they show a 3D print of that? Or was it
don't know if they did.
God, it's beautiful. Julia and I went back and watched that movie recently, because it has color that just goes it's just amazingly colorful, and boy, it would be cool in 3D.
The other one we got, which is one of the last things I got when Warner Archives still sold discs through the actual Warner Archive website, was Kiss Me Kate in 3D.
Yeah.
And the Technicolor Kiss Me Kate is great, but seeing it in 3D was like, they were swinging for the fences with that. Like, hey,
that would be amazing. Yeah.
I didn't know it was in 3D,
era,
so
right?
So I started looking it up and was like, oh yeah, well, because actually, and I don't mean to belabor this too much. People thinking, oh yeah, that's great that you can watch these things. But Creature was what sold Rain on, hey, let's get more 3D movies.
Oh, that's great. I'm so glad to hear
when we
that.
first started watching it, and then I saw, hey, look, it's Kiss Me Kate, because we watched so many musicals together. There's scenes in it that made like, oh yeah, that's why that's that way. It's in 3D, but the stuff that's in Technicolor is great. House of Wax looks great.
Oh yeah, I'll bet.
They actually did a good post, and post can be weird in 3D. It doesn't always work, but they did a good post of Wizard of Oz in 3D. And it looks cool.
Kiss Me Kate came out in 48, and Miss Sadie Thompson is 53. And the reason why they replaced it so quickly in the theaters with a flat version is because it was at the tail end of that.
Oh, sure.
That movement. There is a Miss Sadie Thompson 3D Blu-ray. Is this normal? It's $95.
Oh, that's because it went out of print.
Oh, I see.
If you see it for that much, originally it was probably 20 or 30.
I see.
The weird one that's 3D that's like goes for a lot of money. And I wish I had bought it at the time if I had known is Doctor Strange 3D. Like, I guess it was at the tail end of that era.
Yeah.
Now I'm still getting 3D stuff. Like Kino Lorber is still doing stuff. So they just did Treasure of the Four Crowns, which is not a great 3D. It's not a great movie, but it is fun. The only one that's so far that's been just a super dud is Metal Storm, which the 3D they couldn't restore all the way in a lot of scenes, and it's not a good enough movie to watch it in bad 3D.
I believe
like Metal Storm's a terrible movie.
Okay, well, we need to have a separate conversation.
Sure.
Because we still need to discuss. We should do all of the Amityville movies, honestly, including Amityville 3.
Oh,
I kind of with Tony on that one.
I don't think.
Yeah, me three.
There's the first one, maybe the first couple, but man, I'm not. That's not a retrospective. I'd be like,
I really liked Amityville 3D. It was
that could be charming, and I actually would get a Blu-ray of that to watch it in 3D. But boy.
Okay, fair. You and I could make an Amityville. The funny thing is, because of the peculiar.
Oh no, I've seen.
We could make an Amityville movie tonight.
There's like an Amityville shark movie.
Amityville in space. Yes, I don't know why it's in space.
There's a Amityville werewolf movie now.
Sweet. I mean, seriously, anything you can think of.
I'm in no way endorsing.
I mean, can you imagine you're in a meeting and somebody goes, "Well, what do you got?" And they don't like any of it. You go, "I don't know, Amityville Pride and Prejudice." And like, damn, yeah, give me that script. And you go, oh, okay.
The phone booths of Amityville. Is it going to be? Are they haunted? Yeah.
The Real Housewives of Amityville.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So
Oh, that'll probably get picked up. I think
Yeah.
you should finish that one.
Yes, I know, seriously. My endorsements, the Orville is back. I'm so happy to see the Orville.
Oh yeah.
Unbelievable. And I'll leave it at that because Julie and I have been watching all the same stuff. We've been just shooting through. It becomes like a job. There's so much stuff, but we've been shooting through the Lincoln Lawyer and loving it. But man, the funny thing about the Orville is with Star Trek Strange New Worlds, which is this candy colored episodic. So they're not even doing the thing where there's one major story that covers the whole season. They have backstory just like any episodic show, but it's an old fashioned episodic show. And the Orville is also an old fashioned episodic Star Trek show with the serial number scraped off. So if you're into that, there's now two of them. And
Right.
and the hilarious accident of our time is that, Seth MacFarlane by this season of the Orville has completely stopped even pretending that he ever wanted to do anything else. There's, so the whole, oh no, it's a parody, that's like so gone. it's just completely jettisoned. They're just now in the universe of kind of sort of Star Trek.
And then
you
there's
know.
the actual Star Trek, which is also awesome.
And Strange New Worlds is so darn good. The hilarious thing about Strange New Worlds is that because Strange New Worlds presents the Enterprise as seen in the original The Cage pilot, because it is that show that pilot advertised, it means that in the time span from pilot to series, it literally is the longest span from pilot to series ever in the history of television, because it's something like 50 years. So no, 60. It's closer to 60 years. So it's unbelievable. Yeah, that's a very special, weird record that they broke just by making that show. So yeah, you should watch that if you're into Star Trek. So okay, I know we've gone far afield in this one, but it's felt very friendly to me, and so I feel like I'll forgive it.
Let's hope
For
the
those of you
listeners.
listening, thank you for your indulgence and for letting us talk about 3D Blu-rays and everything else that we wanted to talk about. And I don't know what we're coming back with next week or what, but I can't wait to figure it out. So come to the Facebook page, let us know what you think, and we'll talk to you very soon. Thanks, everybody.
Take
Night.
care, everyone. Night.
Night.